Sikha we will be learning is from the Kurta Sikhas Chelik Chov Hey Sikha Beis Parshas Vayero. Chazal zogen as beschar shomer Avram Avinu Nochi over Veifer Zoch Ubonov L'shtei Mitzvahs Eifer Porav Offer Seita, which means like this. The Gemara says in Seita that as a reward for what Avram Avinu said, Nochi over Veifer, we learn in this week's parsha that he was davening to the Eibishter, asking that the Eibishter should not destroy Sodom, and he gave he justified himself why he has a right to ask, even though L'chura he says, I'm nothing. Well, who am I? I'm just, Ofer means sand, dust, Efer is ashes, which is an expression of meaning that I'm nothing. So what kind of right do I have to intervene? Nevertheless, please this time listen to me. That's what he said. But because he said such a term on himself, which means he described himself as being nothing, using the words Ofer ve'efer, sand and ashes, that's why his children, which means the Yidden, were Zeicha merited to have two mitzvahs, which one is connected to ashes and one is connected to sand. Efer pora ve'ofer seite. The ashes is by pora. We know what pora is. Pora is a pora adum. They have to take a red cow with certain conditions, and they would shecht it and burn it together with other things. And the ashes were used special for a tomei mes, somebody who became tomei, ritual, a spiritual tumah, spiritual impurity. And to become toyer, one of the things which is special by a tomei mes, not by other tumas, you have to be sprinkled with the ashes of the pora adumo, which is mixed with special water, ma'im chayim. It's a mitzvah, and that's a mitzvah that came as a result of Avram Avinu saying, "I am ashes." And then the other mitzvah was offer seita, the sand of a seita. Seitim is a woman who the husband warned her, "Don't go into hiding with a certain man," and she didn't listen. She did go into hiding. They bring her to the Beis Hamikdash, and then they take water and they put sand from the floor of the Beis Hamikdash into the water, and then they write words on the parchment scroll, and it has Hashem's name in those psukim that they write, and then they scrape off those words into the water, and she drinks from it. If she's guilty, she will die. If she won't die, that means that she's innocent. And it's also a mitzvah called the mitzvah of the sand of the Seite. So this mitzvah came as a result that he referred to himself that he's sand. So here we have the two mitzvahs. Because he said, I'm sand and I'm ashes, therefore it was the two mitzvahs, the sand of the Paraduma and the ashes of the Paraduma and the sand of the Satan. So the Rebbe says this, Yidua, the Rebbe gets char and ha'efim for mitik neged midah. We know that the Rebbe gives reward measure for measure, which means the reward has to have some connection to what you did. Whatever you do, the Rebbe will give you reward in a similar union. The full movement, but it down. So from that, we would understand in our case, the shayches from the zwei mitzvahs, Efer Porov, Ofer Seita, Amiras Avrom, Lechi Ofer Veifer, that the connection between these two mitzvahs, the mitzvah of Efer Porov and the mitzvah of Ofer Seita, the connection of that to Avrom saying, I am Ofer Veifer, I am sand and ashes, is not nor mitzvah the dimya from the Werther, Ofer Veifer. It's not only because the same words. What he said were two words, Ofer and Efer. These two mitzvahs, one is connected to Ofer, one is connected to Efer. So it's not just for that. Then it means that there's no teich, no contents connection between the two. It just happen to be words. It could be any words. He said any words, and you find the mitzvah with the same word, you would connect it. No, it must be that there's some connection. While the teichen, nor while the teichen from the zwei mitzvahs is ähnlich zum teichen von Hanogas Avram beifen von Nech Ofer Veifer. It must be that the contents of these two mitzvahs fit to what is behind in what Avram Avinu said when Nech Ofer Veifer, which meant Anova v'shiflus betachlis, as seems from the Gemara in Chulon Peites, Anova v'shiflus betachlis, that he was an onev, he was humble, and he felt himself low, etc., etc. So there must be something in these two mitzvahs that have a connection to the fact that Abraham was so humble. So we have to understand what is the connection in the meaning of the mitzvah. The Rebbe says is other. Not only we don't see a connection, the contrary. The Teichen Pnimi from Paradum is got an Indian Hofki from Avedasi Shel Avraham. The inner meaning, the Chassidish meaning, the Kabbalistic meaning behind Paraduma is the opposite of the Aved of Avraham. Here we're saying it's a schar, a continuation to what Avraham did, or what Avraham said, but it's connected to his Aved. Pikabolet, Paradum is the opposite. Why? Vidasi Shel Avraham is Midas HaChesed. Avraham Me'avid. The Midah, the attribute, the special attribute that Avraham was known for is Midah of Chesed, kindness. That's why the Pasuk refers to him in Yeshaya, Avraham Eyavi. Avraham who loves me. Hashem referred to Avraham, Avraham who loves him. That's Chesed. Avraham is given anodi b'meini b'gufi b'nafshe. We know, taken based on Orches Tzadikim, Avram was kind, generous with his money, with his body, and with his soul. And also it says, Rabbi brings it in order 10, that's from Sefer Aboyer, that it says that Midas HaChesed, Hashem's Midas, Hashem we know has all the spheres. So Hashem's Midas HaChesed told Eibishter, I have a problem. I have no work to do. Because since Avram came into the scene, he does everything for me. In other words, he was similar to the Midas HaChesed of Hashem. He substituted the Midas HaChesed. He did that what Midas HaChesed should do. So that's the union of Avram. Shenke Pora Aduma is the union of Gvura betachlis. Apika Bola, the union of Pora Aduma is the union of Gvura. Chesed is kindness, Gvura is strictness. Complete strictness. We state in Zoyar, says the Zoyar as Pora de Kabbalas Mismaila. It says Pora is Makabal, its nourishment, receives its nourishment from the left side. And we know the right side, Yamin is Chesed, the left side is Gvura. And in Kabbalah, in Zoyar, it says that Pora gets its nourishment, its connection to Smail. Especially when it says in the writings of the Arizal, Asporo, Parhei, that the word par is made of two parts. Par is a bull, hey is 5. The Taisva say it's a par with an addition of a hey, which is 5. Is Maramus of the Allah Gvuras. That hits, we know in Gvura, it says in Kabbalah again, there are 5 levels of Gvura. So the hey of Pora Aduma represents the 5 levels of Gvura, the 5 we call it Inyonim of Gvura. So it all shows how Pora Aduma is Gvura. The Tzui says Pora Aduma. Besides that, the Pora has to be red. The color of red hints to Gvura, to strictness. More than that, it says Pora Aduma Tmima. And the Gemara said the drash is that Rashi brings it also, the Ram from Sifri, that it means Tmima Bad Mumis. It has to be completely red. So the redness, which represents Gvura, is supposed to be strong. Gvura is betachlis, complete Gvuras. The Yisayrim is there, Zokter in Medrash. Besides that, it says in Medrash, as the Alefirt Noim Bepora, the all 4 conditions that said by a Pora Aduma. It says it's supposed to be Aduma, red, Tmimo, complete. Asher Ein Bamum has no blemish. Asher Li'olo Le'el, at no yoke was ever on it. Gain of the Fir Goliath. That refers to Seremes, and the way he explains in Medrash, a Remes, a hint for the 4 types of exile the Yin were. And it says in the order 17, the Rebbe writes, the way he explains it, it's not counting Mitzrayim. Sometimes we count the 4 Goliaths, and starting from Mitzrayim is number 1, and we go on, and the Babel, etc. Sometimes we count 4 without Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is not in that chayv. Mitzrayim is the source, the first one. But after that was finished, then we came 4 more. But whichever way, it represents Golus, and Golus is definitely not the union of Chesed, not kindness. So the question is, how does that fit that this is an extension of what Avram said, or Avram's Aveda, when this is the opposite of Avram's Aveda? Then if the discussion would be about the water, as I said before, what did they do with the ashes? They put it into water, and the water was sprinkled on the person who was stomach. So if we would talk about the water aspect of it, what can wouldn't be a problem. Because water has a nature of coming from wherever it is, it'll always go down to the lowest point. That shows chesed. The whole unit of chesed is going down to somebody lower than you. When you do chesed, somebody who has less than you do chesed, you give him money. Someone that understands less than you explain it to him. So mayim, water always represents chesed. Especially the water that's connected to the poraduma, which, as we said before, is called mechatos. For whatever reason, the poraduma is referred to as chatos. Mechatos is the water. So that has to be not plain water. It has to be Maim Chaim, living water. So you can imagine whatever water represents, this is even more. Living water, living in of Chesed. So if it would be on the water, we could say, yeah, it fits the Avram. From Chesed, the water is Chesed. But we're talking here about the ashes of the Porah. For the Eifer kommt doch from the Porah Gufa. The Eifer, the ashes is from the Porah itself. If it's from the Porah itself, the Porah represents Gvura. And Avram is Chesed. How do we say that there's an extension of something that Avram did, which is Chesed? By him it's Chesed, comes the union of Gvura, which is the Porah Aduma. The Shleimer the Beer and them, you could explain it like this. As says, Chesed. We know that there are 2 ways in the bid of Chesed, 2 types of midas of Chesed. And the way that is going to say they're both good. But one is good and one is completely good. One is you do Chesed because of Gdula. It's there in the order of 24 says it's Chesed the Kedusha. It's even called Rav Chesed. like by a person, because of your greatness, you do a lot of chesed. Meaning, al derech l'mezayim by a melech gadol, or by a sar v'oshem ufla, just like we see by a big king or by a officer, a very rich man. As so sein hergesh hagadlus, because he feels like he has a lot and he's great. Stehen sie not nur von the deepest barchovek dela. So these people who are in that level, they're always very generous. They live in a level of generosity. If they give to anybody, small or big, because it comes from a good midah, because they're great and they have a lot. So they have in them this midah of generosity. But their phone can nicht alsche werden lamata drinne für chesed de klippe, chesed yishmol. Because this is good the way it is, but what could happen if you go for that type of chesed, Rebbe says, it could become nicht alshel to chesed de klippe. We know that chesed is in Kedusha Avram, and Yishmol is also chesed, but the chesed of klippe. How is there and everything comes from Kedusha, because if you have the level of chesed in Kedusha because of your greatness, and it doesn't mean because you're a Baal Gaiva, but it could turn out that eventually this will turn in that it comes chesed klippe, but kun by Ishmael, it's at gavus gasus, comes from his holding himself big and his grobkeit. He thinks he's so great and so special. That's why he does it. That he wants to show his riches, wants to show the beauty of its greatness. But should be for a good name for him, for the beauty of him. That's no good. But we're not even talking about that. The Rebbe just derech agav in brackets says that from this level of chesed you could come to klippe, but the level of chesed itself is not bad. It's good. You have this generosity within you because you have a lot and you're great. You have the generosity. A zweiten way from the chesed is the second way in chesed is chesed Avram. The way chesed was by Avram. But their chesed is adarabah verbunden mit bittul l'shiflas. That this chesed doesn't come because you're so rich and you're so big and you're so great. So you do chesed. This is connected to bittul, to self-nullification, shiftless, which you feel yourself low, which is v'nechi offer v'efer, because you're like nothing, you're like ashes, you're like the sand, which shows bittul, which means mitzadem was gehalten kleine von allem, because Avram held himself lower than everybody else. Meisi masmek yisharayim, it's a lotion of Gemara Roshon. You make yourself like nothing, like you're extra, you're over. The riber at the mashbigim chesed tzalman, and that's why he gave chesed. It didn't come because he was so rich and made like I should give, which is a good thing to do. For him, it came because he felt himself. He's so nothing that others deserve more than him. But the ufto and yisra mile in them if nashpasa chesed, the specialty and the greater mile in this level of giving chesed is not nor in them is by sich bottle shofel made. Is not only in this that whoever is bottle and holds himself very low, thinking that holding that everybody is more important than him. So you give everybody everything you have. What you take for yourself, whatever's left over. But if your chesed comes because you have a lot of money and it's a good thing, it's from you give, but still, you give a lot. But the main part you leave for yourself. The second one you give the extra things, which is good. Do it to do that. But if you do it like Avram, so that is different. You give everything you have because you don't need that. You're nothing. So why would you get anything? The other person deserves more. But that's not only in that. Nor noch mehr, wie der Alter Rebbe sagt in Likutei Torah. Alter Rebbe says in Likutei Torah, another word there. As afila magia leireisem magmilas chesed. If you're the second level because of bittul, even if you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to harm yourself by doing the chesed. You don't hold back from giving chesed. If you do it, it's a lot of great things that you have, but if it's going to hurt you because you care for yourself also, you won't do it. But the second level, which is Avram, he would do the chesed even if it means hurting himself. By Avram, we find it by Avram. As we said, his chesed was because he felt himself like sand and dust, and ashes. As nicht nur as given great to stellen sich sakonas and chayagu. What do we see by him? That not only was he ready to put in danger his physical life, to help him to help somebody else, so he was ready to harm himself, put himself in harm's way, in order to help somebody. Where do we see it? With the Tzilt and Pashalech. Pashalech, it says, that's the first place where we find in Chumash that Avram was involved in Chesed. Also, the meaning from Pidyon Shvoyim, because of union of saving, redeeming the captives, which was late. So, because of that, he put himself in danger. And this is Pidyon Shvoim is the biggest mitzvah. But still, there's a limit, so long as you don't hurt yourself. But he was ready. Hat sich Avram gestellt in Sakone und geführt am Milchome mit dem Malachim gebeten. He put himself in danger, had a war with these strong, strong kings. So that's what we see that Avram Avinu had the mitzvah chesed, even if he had been putting his life, physical life, in danger. Which Rabbi says in the Order 2036, there's even the whole discussion if you're allowed to do that. Is a person allowed to put his life in danger in order to help another Yid? But Lepeil, he went out of his way and did it. He did not scan the shaylas. But Nochmer, because of that, he gave away from his spiritual life. Where do we see that? I said it says in the beginning of Parshas Vayero, when the three people, the three malachim came, and he thought they were people that Avram Avinu gesagt zum Eibishter, the Eibishter came to see him. And then he saw the guest coming. So he told the Eibishter, wait, I have to go first, run and bring the guest in. Das heißt, it means that is by Avram and given recht zu überreißen the Vinye von Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina. Because of this mitzvah, this specialty of helping others by bringing them in as guests, he was ready to cut himself off his connection to the Eibishter, which Eibishter talking to him, which is cutting itself away, Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina, receiving the face of the Shchina. With the Gemara learned top their phone, the Gemara learns from Abraham, that to bring in Achnas Esorchim is like, or even more than Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina. So here we see that the Rebbe will explain Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina by Avraham Avinu was something very high madrege, and he gave that up to do what? To feed these orchim, this guest. And the Rebbe will give the details. So Dovra moving as for Avraham, was ein ganzes Leben is given nicht kechaim psorim, kechaim ruchnim. Self understood that by Avraham that his whole life was not physical, the physical part of his life, but it's ruchnis part of the life. So is oplosen. Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina aggressor mesirish nefesh und aggressor bein areich wie das Einstellen chayaduf. Since that was his life was the ruchnius. So to give up a ruchnisdike thing is a greater mesirish nefesh and bein areich than giving up his physical life. So that is even a greater mesirish nefesh than putting his life on the line by fighting kings. Noch mehr, go further. So the welche orchem at Avraham Yibikris in the matzah of Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina. Because of which guest in his mind was he ready to give up and to cut his connection to the Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina. For those people that he thought are Arabs, that they bow down. Their Avodah Zarah is the dust on their feet, which is nicht stam Avodah Zarah. It's not just plain people who worship Avodah Zarah. No, the niederigste, the worst, the lowest of Avodah Zarah. Noch niedriger, noch the lowest possible, because the feet is the lowest part. But it wasn't even for the feet. It was for the dust on the feet. Imagine how low they lowered themselves. And that kind of Eifen von Avodah Zarah, that kind of word of Avodah Zarah. So comes out, as Avram hat sich abgerissen für die höchste Darkness Beruchnius, wie sie ist der Linie von Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina, comes out that Avram tore himself away from the highest special Ruchnisdike levels, as we understand Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina. By Avram. For him, Eichen is money, when by Avram is not given the matzah from Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina, because the truth is, and even in those times when he wasn't standing in front of the Shechina, he's a given Amrakova Lashem. He was like a Merkava to Hashem, Kol Yemechai with their alter Rebbe Zoktek Diovis. And Merkava Hashem, so Loshen the Medrish, that he was, the Avos were the chariots, but Chassidus Taichus and Tanya Taichus, what does it mean the chariots? They were chariots. So just like a chariot, just like a wagon, travels and takes you places, but it has no will of its own. It only does what the rider wants it. The Avos were like that. They had no will of their own. And the Alter Rebbe says, As kol yemeim le'elam liyafsika afilu shoachas v'zayin amerkova, that not in all their life, they didn't stop for a second from being a merkova. So if every second of his life he was bottled to Hashem. Now for a statement, the Ile b'shas Vayero el Hashem, this galas b'riyah. So you can imagine if a person that he's always close to Hashem, now Hashem wasn't his galat to him, or really imagine how great that is. Nevertheless, he went away from it, gave it up, to help such people who their behavior in his eyes, because he thought they worship their dust on their feet, in order to help them, people who are against what Eibishter is. The complete opposite from Kabbalas B'nai Ashchina. So he did that. He gave up. Finally, he's gekommen zu Avram as Anhage. How did Avram get some kind of such Anhage? Those was seen noch Avram and führen sich as the fact that Yidden, after Avram, always behaved that way, Is not Chidish. That's no Chidish. It's nothing special. It's Aroma for Eshes and Torah. They lachnas sorchim yesim akabals v'lashchina because it says in Torah. We know talking from Avram, but Lopel we know and it's a din Shchonoruch and it's a din in Gemara that to receive orchim is greater than receiving the Shchina. So we do it. Aber wann hat das im Avram abgelernt? Where did Avram learn this from? So it's interesting. Order 45, the Rebbe says in Derech Hapshat, you could say he learned it from this. He learned that Hashem came to visit him. So why did Hashem have to make it should be so hot and no guest will come? Because if the Gbolas Bnei Ashchina is greater than guest, David didn't have to take out the sun. David could just come to him, and that would make it for sure that Avram should not receive guest, even if it's not hot. Even people would knock on the door. But how could you give up Gbolas Bnei Ashchina? So Avram Avinu understood the fact that in order for him not to receive guest, David had to make it hot so no people should come. In other words, by the fact that David came to him, and still he had to make it hot so the orchim shouldn't come. Is araya that from Agbolas Bnei Ashchina he wouldn't. David wanted not to stop the orchim. So Avram Avinu himself, we understand where he took no. So in Derech Hapshat we understand where Avram took it from, but here we're talking about not Pshat in deeper. So he says, you know where he took it from? Avram is canal given betachas abitel v'neichi offer v'efer. Avram is completely bottled. That's in the hint of the word anechi offer v'efer. Is the ribet by him given upgelegt? So therefore, if that was his level, it was obvious in his clearly in his mind. As jeder eine wer soll nur sein kommt früher vor ihm. That everybody, whoever it is, comes before him. That even your own ruchnias you have to put aside to help somebody else begashmias. That's what he's going to do. So we see here, Avram's derech navede was, and it's hinted in the words bitl so much that he gave up of himself begashmias, and he gave up of himself ruchnias for somebody else. And this is the shaykhis from Amiras Avram and Eichi Offer Ve'efer. This is the connection between Avram saying, I am Offer Ve'efer to the zwei mitzvahs and Eifer Poro Offer Seite. That we see the connection to these two mitzvahs, the ashes of the Pora Duma and the sand of the Seite. Why? Well, the kiyum von these zwei mitzvahs is verbunden dafti mit dem Hergish HaChesed wie das kommt zu Eichi Offer Ve'efer. Because in order to fulfill these mitzvahs, you have to be in such a level like what Avram said, as we said before, Avram was so bottled that he gave up from himself kashmis and ruchnis for others. That's the teichen of words and that's the teichen of these two mitzvahs also. Al derech was given by Avram, that you have to do it. In order to do this mitzvah, you have to be in the mindset like Avram. So sich meiser nefesh ein beruchnis zu helfen nach Zweden, but das weiß genau, mesiras nefesh am nitis. That you should be meiser nefesh, give up your ruchnias in order to help another person. And that's the real mesiras nefesh. It's more mesiras nefesh than gashmias. Like we said before, by Avram, gashmias was not so important. So he gave up his gashmis, his life, physical life. But ruchnias, and nevertheless, the real mesiras nefesh, that's the teichen of the mitzvah Eifer Poro and Offer Seit. How? The din by Poro Aduma is kol eskim b'Poro mitchila v'atsof v'en tomei. Anybody who's involved in the preparation of making the Poro Aduma becomes tomei. That's a din. Whatever the Eibush was, why he did it. But the din is you become tomei. Es fordert sich von dem Kayan, was in Yon is Gdusha V'Tara L'Shoras B'Beis HaMikdash. It comes like this. The Kayan is going to be involved in making the Pora Aduma. What's the union of a Kayan B'chlal? He has to be holy. He has to be always toyer. He always has to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. He always has to be toyer. So what do we want? What's happening when he gets involved in making the Pora Aduma? So it comes out here that to make the Pora Aduma requires, as a Yeder Zaym Madrigosei, he has to lower his level. This to Tomei. He has to become Tomei. If he's going to make a paradum, the only way is to become Tomei. Und durch dem dit cannot turn the Beis HaMikdash, but Bailey won't be able to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And why would he do that? Because they can bring the Tara for a zweiten Yid. And this will enable that a second Yid who's Tomei mess will be able to become Toyer. So we see here that the union of Eifer Poro represents this idea of giving up from your Ruchnias for helping another Yid. And for welche Yiden darf der Kain sich mit Tamas ein? And for what kind of Yid? Cain became Tomei to help another Yid to get tired. What kind of Tomei is the other Yid? Tomei mess. We're talking about the Tomei that became Tomei by coming in contact with a dead body. A dead body is called Avi Havei Tumeh, the grandfather of Tumeh. Anything that comes in contact with a mess becomes an Ava Tumeh. The next one is Rishon L'Tumah. So we're talking about Aviyah Beisatuma. That's the source of this reason for the Poraduma, to help a person got in touch with Aviyah Beisatuma. Was Beruchnis meint, as Beruchnis it means, because Aid is double to maybe in Shaykhs in Amisbatuma. When Aid is connected to Hashem, it's not Shaykhs, he should become Tomei. Which never, like it says, Va'atem advekim Hashem alekechem chayim kulchem hayem. That you are Dova, you are connected to Hashem, chayim kulchem hayem, and you always live. In other words, you're connected, you will live. So, Misa means that you're not connected to Hashem. Tumas mes, weiß, that means Rachmana litzlan abgerissen from Kedusha. The fact that you're tummy from a mess shows that you're cut off from Kedusha. Misa says es is bedarge von Tumas mes. Till you're not darge, when you're torn away from the Eibishter in a very strong way, we could refer to it as Tumas mes. He's like a mess. He has no chayes, but maybe he's not dovek to Hashem. And so the Basayid munten bam Kayin. And because of a Yid like that, we ask the Kayin, as er soll dich nicht rechen mit sein Ruchnius und sich mit Tamer sein, damit zu helfen, den Bieden zu bekommen mit der Tare. Don't make a cheshbon of your Ruchnius that you're going to give up your Ruchnius. Too bad. That's what we want you to give up from your Ruchnius to help such a low Yid that he should be able to come to it. So that's how we see this Indian in Efer Poro. Al derech zeh, offer a Seite. The same, he's been engaged the ashes of a Seite. The roof of a Seite is, the purpose of this water of a Seite is Lasa Sholem and Nishli Ishtay. It says in Gemara like this. This is a case where she did something wrong, and could be she didn't do anything. We don't know what she did. When she went into hiding and she didn't listen, we don't know if she's guilty of doing something actually wrong or not. And this is going to show if she's innocent, it'll show her innocent. Until she drinks, she's forbidden to be with her husband because she's a saita. So what's the purpose of the water? That if she's innocent, this will show and she'll be able to go back to her husband. And because of that, what do? We put the sand in the water. And then the Torah said we have to write a scroll with psukim, with Hashem's name, scrape it off, erase it into the water. So it says, Omra Torah, David said, in order to make shalom between a man and his wife, the Torah said, Shemi shenichter kedusha yimochal hamayim. My name that was written in holiness should be erased on the water. As in the talking, there's no bigger chilul of holiness, desecration of holiness, than taking with your hands, scraping off, erasing Hashem's name. But in order to make shalom between one man and a wife, David said, we erase the name. What kind of person are we trying to help here? A woman, she behaved not sneezdik. When she went into hiding, she was wrong from her. She did something wrong. Now, we hope that she didn't do anything further, but maybe she will come out innocent. But such a woman. And this happened after the husband warned her. That's the whole thing of a saita. He told her not to go. And she didn't listen, and she hid. From deswegen sagt Torah, still the Torah says that for this sholem, with this woman, is kedayus is a mitzvah tzivur to make like Shem HaKodesh. That's a commandment, and it's a mitzvah to erase Hashem's name. So now we see that also the mitzvah of offer a saita is connected to this idea that the person who's going to do this, the kohen, whoever's going to do this, will do something terrible. Imagine how you feel that you're taking Hashem's name and erasing it. You know the worst things to erase Hashem's name. He's going to do it. This Baruchnis is terrible in order to help this woman who is so low. But nevertheless, the Torah wants that to happen. So it's similar to what Avram did, that he was ready to give up from his Ruchnias to help another person. Like neben dem Worden Bier and the Shaykhs from Nichi over Veifet, Support Aduma, based on what we said before, the whole connection of Onech over Veifet, Support Aduma, that Por Aduma represents the same idea of bittul that you give up of yourself for others, that Ech Zukum and Atesas Asbor in Asipur and Zayar, B'Shaykhs Support Aduma. This will add extra explanation in a story in Zayar, which is connected to Por Aduma. In Zayar wird erzählt, it says in Zayar, as Pinchas ben Yoyer had gebeten by the Pshim ben Yechoy, as sagen, Milse Chadet and Pasha says Chukas HaTorah. It says in Zayar in the beginning of Chukas that Pinchas ben Yoyer, who was the father-in-law of Pshim ben Yechoy, asked Pshim ben Yechoy, he should say a new word, Milse Chadet, something, a new Dvar Torah, in the Pasha of Zeis Chukas HaTorah, which is the Pasha Por Aduma. But the Pshim ben Yechoy gebeten, as Rabbi Lozer ben Lezel zog Milachat. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yechoy turned around to his son, to Rabbi Lozer, and he said he should say. And Rabbi Lozer said it. Is the Tata Mavayid in Zayin Ha'oras of Zayar, says the Rebbe says, my father explains in his comments on the Zayar, why did Pinchas ben Yoyer want them new pshat, new word, new dvar Torah in the Parsha Por Aduma? So the Rebbe's father explains that Dosi Lafar was Pchinas Pinchas Ben Yair al derech Avram Avinu, because the level of Pikaboli, everything is Pikaboli. The level of Pinchas Ben Yair is in the same, comes from the same area and the same type as Avram Avinu. And by Avram it says the words Adechi offer ve'efer. Because he said, I am like Efer, that's part, he was zeicha to the ashes of the paraduma. And that's why the Pinchas Ben Yair has a connection to paraduma, because he's like Avram, and Avram said something which brought about paraduma. So therefore, he wanted they should say a Torah in paraduma. He said, verstanden, it's not understood. Wie bald hat von paraduma, the Sheikhas of Pinchas Ben Yair, since the paraduma is a connection to the Pinchas Ben Yair. For that Atzman nicht gesagt, in Parshas paraduma, so why didn't he do it himself? If the reason he wanted something to be said in paraduma, because that's his ruchnistic, Kabbalistic inyan, so he should have said himself that's his inyan. But that is now go to the second part. He turned to Rashbi, and Rashbi turned to his son. So Rashbi, was der Pinchas Bar Yair ihm gebeten, zu sagen, der Milchadete, der Pfarrer of Sinyonische Paraduma, der Sheikhas Pinchas Rashbi, the Tato that Mavai. So the Rebbe's father explains that why did he turn to Rashbi? Because Rashbi is also in the level of Paraduma. So what did he do? The same thing. Hatte ich das nicht gesagt, nur gebeten, sagen Rabbi Lozer B'nai. He didn't say it. So the Pinchas Ben Yair as a Sheikhas Paraduma, he turned around to Rashbi. Rashbi as a Sheikhas Paraduma turned around to his son, and his son did it. Why? Why didn't he do it himself? Pianal, based on what I've said before, the Sheikhas von Neichaf Repefe zu Paradum is Mr. Ranoghe von Avram, wie das Achesed, even from Bittel, that the whole lineage we said before, the connection of Paraduma is because Avram said Neichaf Repefe, meaning that he was so bottled that he gave up of himself. Helping somebody else will understand. Yashleima, we can say the Pshat. The Sheikhas Bepashtas, zwischen der Pinchas Ben Yair and Chesed Avram is, in simple Pshat, what's the connection between the Pinchas Ben Yair and Avram? So he explained that Pikabola, the Rebbe's father, the Sheikhas of Pinchas Ben and Avram. But Bepashtas, what is Bepashtas? So now the 57, the Rebbe says, in addition to what it says in L'Kuz Leib Yitzchak, the Rebbe's father in Kabbalah with connection. But Bepashtas, there is a connection. We see a close connection, push it, between Pinchas Ben Yair and Avram Avinu. What's the connection? So when you think that Pinchas Ben Yair, when you find it in Marachul, that Pinchas Ben Yair was very much involved in the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvoyim. Redeeming hostages, we call them, redeeming captives. Plus Kenal, he does the Resh Sipur in Torah, like Chesed Avram. And as we said before, the first story of Chesed Avram in the Torah is when he did Pidyon Shvoyim. He went to save Leib. But das ist Chesed, was ist verbunden mit Einstellen sich in Sakone, Ratem nach Zweiten. Which means this is putting yourself on the line, what Avram did. He went to protect the Shvoyim, Leib, to save Leib, even though he put his life on the line. And that was so the Pinchas Ben Yair and Avram is the same. They're pashtas. They're both chesed. But in Pashat, he put out Pinchas Ben Yair also did the same. He went to save people even though it wasn't so simple. Now this Shaykh was Pinchas Ben Yair, it's a chesed Avram, it's a Mesichel Sefer Torah. And this connection of Pinchas Ben Yair and Avram, which is the reason why you got the mitzvah of Sefer Torah, but the Pinchas Ben Yair gewollt Oizrik in the Minyan Gufer. So the Pinchas Ben Yair wanted not only that's his level in Ruchnius. He wanted to do that. He wanted to do exactly what Porah Aduma means in connection to Avram Avinu and him. Why? If Ufton Amil Chadet in Parashat Porah Aduma, he wanted to, something should come new, a new idea in Porah Aduma. That's what he asked him to say. So he wanted not only ask someone to say a new word, he wanted to behave in a new word, as we'll see. And in the same way, what did he do? So he overlooked the fact that he himself could have said a new word in Torah, but it's a great thing to be mechadish in the Torah. So he could have a mechadish in the Torah for Adum, and that's his madrege, and it's similar to Avram, Alamailis. Why didn't he? He wanted someone else to have the schus. Mesiras nefesh beruchnis for a zweiten Niden. It's a mesiras nefesh. He is able to say something has to do with his madrege and ruchnis, a big chidush, and he gave it away to somebody else. And in or 60, the Rabbi even says that you could say that we know that the first Paraduma was made by Elazar, not by Aaron, not by King Godel, not by any by the Sgan King Godel, the second in command. So that's what the Rasha says. So that also shows the same thing. The King Godel, who is the one that usually does everything, when something special, he's the one to do it. He gave up his chus to bring tare, such a tare that she could be matayr Thomas Mess. That means he gave it over to the Sgan. The Sgan means the second in command. He didn't do it himself. But the Rebbe said that's not what the Zayar says. Zayar says a different reason it couldn't be done with Aaron. Whatever it is, but we see by Porah Adum and the Sinyan, and that's what the Pirchas Vayero did. Well, there is Rashbi, same thing. Rishon Ben Yechoy had mevatek when sein schus. He gave up his schus of being able to say something the Torah of Porah Aduma. Kedei as Rebbe Lozer b'nei zol haben dem schus. In order that Rebbe Lozer, his son, should have that schus. The Tati is Mavayer, and the Rebbe said, I'm commenting that my father explains, Ados was Rebbe Lozer gezog di milch chadet is al derek v'shapor rishin and ase Rebbe Lozer akein. So he says this is similar. The Rebbe's father says to that the first Porah Aduma was made by a Lozer. So the Rebbe's father connects Porah Aduma, the original Porah Aduma, to the story of Pinchas B'Yoyer. And the Rebbe in the Hora that we just read before, or 60, says that Nekuda, that it's from a different angle, that the first Porah Aduma made by a Lozer. So the Rebbe's father says connected to the name of Lozer. But the Rebbe says the idea is the same, because the first one was made by the Sgan, the second in command, not the Kohen Gadol, because he gave up his rights. Api kolanat vatich werden verstandig verwas der Schare verwedes Avrom nicht auf Vefer ist verbunden mit Eifer Porah darf gedit mit Mechatos. This will also explain by the reward for what Avram did when he said on Eichel Vefer. It's connected to the ashes of the Porah Aduma and not to the water, the Mechatos of the Porah Aduma. Der Eifer und Alf von Chesed Avram was hat weggegeben, viele eigene Ruchnis zu helfen. This idea that we said before, that Avram's chesed in such a way that he gave up his own, even his Ruchnis, to help another person, he's verbunden mit der Miet, was zu lieb der Minen nach chesed, that's because he used every part of his body for chesed, even the midas agvura, because we know every person has all 10. Avram's chesed, but he also had the midas agvura. The main midah was chesed, but in order to do what he did, he had to use gvura too. That means that the senior of giving up of yourself is so important that you have to use every part to give over. How do we see by Avram and you need to use Mises Agvura? Ki yedu apirish in the posek yidaiti v'man asher yitzav elased tzedakah mishpat. David said, I love Avram because I know he's going to command his children. They will do tzedakah and mishpat. Tzedakah is charity. Mishpat is judgment. Now, the judgment is usually when you judge, you're very strict. Tzedakah is opposite. You're very kind. You're very generous. So what is the pshat he did? He's teaching his children to do tzedakah and mishpat. So the Chassidus, in Chassidus it says that the pshat is that the tzedakah from Avram and he gave him verbunden mit mishpat. His tzedakah was connected to mishpat. Now, normal tzedakah is connected to chesed, only chesed. By him it is connected to judgment too. Früher hat Avram sich geschäft gewinnt, sich abgeschätzt, wie viel muss haben für sich. First he made a judgment. What does he need for himself? Was of them hat gemacht, a strenge mishpat, begvura bedin. He made a strong mishpat, the judgment, very strict, and he specifically made very, in other words, wasn't generous, was very strict, what he's going to get himself. Feeling that whatever he takes for himself is only what he must have. Das ganze übrige hat gegeben mit tzedakah. And the rest gave the tzedakah. So tzedakah is the good part, but in order to get that level of tzedakah of Avraham, he had to do gvura, he had to do a mishpat on himself. And this behavior, that even your midah of gvura works, helps you to do chesed, is verbunden mit der tchuna from bittul. It's connected to bittul. Why would a person do it? How could a person do it? Only if a bittul, which is v'nech yofer vei for the bittul. How? Shaz der chesed kommt some bittul. The chesed comes from bittul. Demult is der chesed nicht begrenzt zu einem Teil von Menschen. If it's bittul means it's not you involved. You're out of the picture yourself. You have to do whatever the chesed is. So it's not limited to one part of you. Chesed in the Mtsir for midas chesed doesn't have to be chesed in the form of chesed, of kindness, of generosity. It penetrates into every part of the person. Everything is transformed to bittul. In other words, your gevura becomes also bittul to the Eibush. You use your gevura to do the chesed. You take the gevura, which on its own, it's the opposite of chesed. As the midas gevura, but to the chesed, you use the midas gevura to chesed. Those are the tam. This is why saying which is the real bittul that he had, brought to the mitzvah of the ashes of the Paraduma and the sand from the Seder. Weil der Rike ruft auf Eich Afer Veifer, der Richt sich ist nicht in der Minja von Chesed Mikore. Because this mile of Avram, and this great bittul of Avram, is not in Chesed. That's a big mile too, he said before. Now we come at a deeper point, that the Gevura turns into Chesed. Because otherwise it will be a problem. If the whole thing is Chesed, and it's such a great Chesed, like I said before, then it should be with the water, to show that it's Chesed. He's doing so much Chesed. So Rabbi said, if it be with the water, then you would think that in normal case, the Iker of is not, in the fact is, not when is the main thing of the bittul that turned into the real deep level of Chesed, mitzvah bittul, is not in Chesed itself, which is represented in the Meichatas in the water. Was Mayim is Chesed canal, as we said before, water is Chesed. Nor in them was Macht Iber the Gvura Chesed, by changing the Gvura to Chesed. That shows the real bittul, and that's the real Chesed, showing the highest level of Chesed. Was das the Inyan for Sreifas Apora bittul. This is the whole Inyan of burning the Pora Duma. Burning is the Inyan of bittul. And this so Pora is Gvura, and the burning of the Pora, it says, is Hamtokas Agvuras. It's called sweetening of the strictness. That's transformation of the strictness into chesed. Und davon wird der Eifer poret. So the ash has come after it's burned, which means the real bittul, which is the burning, and it's taking the gvura, and the gvura is being used in the chesed that we said before to help somebody else. And when we look at the Torah, that's the inyan from Eifer. The Torah says the inyan of Eifer, which is ashes, it's the same letters of poro, but instead of a hey, an aleph. Eifer is aleph peiresh, and poro is peiresh hey. Was weiß at the hey gvuras canal. Poro shows on the hey gvuras. We said in the beginning of the sikh, it's five strictness. That instead of having poro, which is par hey, vert eifer. And what's eifer? Aleph par. The par is gvura. The hey is the hey gvuras. But what happens is what the Eibusha wants for the mitzvah of pora duma, that it should be transformed into chesed. It should be aleph par. But that aleph, aleph is the beginning. The root of midas agvura, it says in Chassidus, is that sof kosof, if you reach that level of the root of gvura, you'll bring more chesed. You'll transform the gvura into chesed. And that's why it says Loshan Hamtokas Agvuras, to change and sweeten the gvuras, you have to be able to reach the sheirish. Eifer porim means you reach in the sheirish, and now it becomes real gvura. And the Rebbe doesn't go into this. A lot of times you find Chassidus that at a very high level there is no gvura. There is gvura, but the gvura is not in a negative way. But the gvura is the strength hagboras hachsodim, that the chesed is very strong. And then as the roof of Ofra Seita, the same thing with the ashes of the sand of the Seita, but says Mahapir, the Mayim Amorim, it transforms the bitter water, the Mayim Amorim, which is Gvura, is on Ufton the Pulishal Chesed. The water which is bittel, which is Gvura, the bitter water which is Gvura, bitter is Gvura, should change to Chesed. Where do we find that it changed to Chesed? It says if she came out innocent, the Niksra of Nizra Zora, she would be cleared from the problem, and Nizra Zora shall have children. And then the Gemara says, Rasha brings that certain things, if she was before not able to have children, she'll have children. So the Gevura of the Ofra Seita turns into Chesed. That means that even the Gevura is used for Chesed. That's the Mile of Avram and the Mile of the Chesed of Avram.